Chapter 10. The Run. Okay, I'm counting on every one of you. Everyone gathered there nodded back at Alisa. They had all shared the expected enemy tactics and their counter-strategies during practice when they all got together for mock battles, so all they needed to do right now was a quick review. And yet Masachika found himself deeply moved as he watched Alisa take charge of such a large group. She really has grown. While he watched Alisa with a mixture of joy and loneliness, a feeling not unlike that of a parent. By the way, Tokishi muttered timidly while staring at Elena. Elena, are you really going out there dressed like that? Tokishi's comment drew everyone's attention to Elena, who suddenly placed a hand on her cheek while she boldly grinned. Who is this Elena you speak of? I am the mysterious hero, Sexy Mask. Elena's eyes widened, her gaze framed by a lacy Venetian mask, the kind that actors wore at masquerade balls in the movies. It was a mask to conceal her identity, and it was the compromise that Masachika had offered when he invited her to join the run. Incidentally, Elena was the one who chose the mask and alias. That was perfect. Elena, Sexy Fut. Sexy Mask. Did you just laugh? Not at all. Masachika nonchalantly shook his head. Then, with a serious expression, he nodded and continued. Anyway, this should keep her identity a secret from the other students, and even if they do figure out who she is, it's not like Elena's publicly endorsing Alisa and me, so it should be fine. Teehee. Really? Elena flicked her newly tied ponytail back, looking quite pleased with herself. But Hikaru still raised a hesitant, skeptical voice. I'm fairly certain that mask isn't going to fool anyone. What are you saying? Countless people have worn masks around their eyes, and nobody ever figured out who they were. Besides, check out this new hairstyle. Nobody's going to be able to connect the dots. I am pretty sure you're thinking about comic books. Guys, people are just going to think that she tied her ponytail on the wrong side of her head, argued Hikaru, looking around in search for agreement. But, you look so nice, Elena, muttered Maria, dreamy-eyed. I think it works, too. Sayaka's nerdy heart must have been dancing in excitement. Like, I've legit never seen anyone wear a mask like that outside of a photo shoot. Nonoa was acting like this had nothing to do with her. I think it looks very fashionable. Perhaps we should wear masks like that next time, remarked Samaya. The Sisters of the Four Seasons appeared to be bubbling with excitement for some unknown reason, leaving Masachika curious about what kind of superhero team they were attempting to form here. The only ones feeling skeptical like Hikaru seemed to be Alisa and Tokishi, so they were up against the overwhelming majority. Well, if Elena's fine with this, then I guess that's all that matters. But almost immediately after Hikaru folded, the announcer's voice boomed over the crowd. I know everyone is just getting ready for their lunch break, but it's time for a special program, The Run. The crowd erupted with cheers. Now let's welcome our first team. Coming out of the gate, we have Alisa Kujou and Masachika Kuze. Surrounded by cheering crowds and expectant eyes, Masachika and his group emerged from the gate onto the field. Let's give it up for the captain and rider, Alisa Mikhailovna Kujou, and for her helpers making the horse, we have Masachika Kuze, Maria Mikhailovna Kujou, and The commentator hesitated when he reached the last contestant, then, with a tinge of embarrassment in his voice, he announced, the mysterious hero, Sexy Mask. Elena aka Sexy Mask struck a pose with a peace sign while shouting, Yare, during her bizarre introduction, creating a stir of confusion among the crowd. What an amazing costume. We need a narrator to give us some backstory on this hero. What an elegant woman. Masachika firmly nodded as he listened to their comments. Good job, Sexy Mask. Sounds like you've got them completely fooled. Really? Because they're saying things that are kind of worrying me. Captain. You've got this. Thanks. Hey. I'm not your captain. Elena had waved to the female student who looked like she was probably in the brass band club, only to immediately deny that she was Elena. Then, seemingly realizing how absurd this all was, she leaned in closer to Masachika and whispered, Hey, are you sure I'm fooling them? Is this okay? Don't worry. As I mentioned earlier, everyone will understand why you're wearing a mask, even if they figure out it's you. Really, argued Masachika with an air of confidence as he tried to reassure his schoolmate. Of course, some people might just think that Elena's messing around, but simply having her with us is going to have a pretty big impact, regardless of the fact that she's in costume. He kept his devious thoughts to himself, though. At any rate, The audience had burst into a frenzy of enthusiastic cheers as the commentator introduced each member. Whoa! Is that Samaya Kiryuin? And the disciplinary committee is with her, the sisters of the 4 seasons from the Kendo Club. Are they really going to be doing the run with them? Looks like Maria Kujou and Elle, that mysterious woman, are going to be part of the horse, and the other team looks like it's made up of her band friends. Not surprising, except for the mysterious woman. Dude, come on. That team is stacked. She has her old rival, Sayaka, now teaming up with her. She even got Samaya on board. This is like some kind of student council dream team in the works. Yeah, good point. If she was telling the truth during the first semester greeting, then maybe she plans on getting Samaya to join her new student council, too? Because if that's the case, then I'm definitely voting for Alisa Kujou. The surrounding students stared at Alisa and her teammates with sparkles in their eyes and anticipation in their hearts, as if they were imagining the student council that would one day be formed. Sounds like we made the right picks for our teams. I'm glad we stuck to Alya's belief of including even former rivals and picking people at least somewhat involved with the student council. Masachika was really happy to hear all the positive reactions. Hold up. Does this mean that Q's going to have a harem all to himself? There was at least one student who was focusing on the wrong thing, but Masachika simply pretended like he didn't hear anything. Now, let's give it up for the other team coming from the opposite gate, Yuki Suwu and Ayono Kimishima. Once the introductions for Masachika's team had finished, Yuki and Ayono made their entrance. The instant Masachika saw their team, however, his eyes widened in utter astonishment. You've got to be kidding me. What the? Wow. Has she no shame? She really brought some notable helpers with her. Elena let out a startled gasp while Samaya responded with a mix of admiration and suspicion. But amid their reactions, Sayaka calmly pushed up her glasses and speculated. I'm assuming that everyone other than their riders, Kaji and Asama, are going to be extremely athletic students. She created the ultimate team of warriors, and I suppose the reason she could do that was because of her wide network of contacts. I guess there is no better way to show off all the connections you have than this. For real. Other than the riders, she legit just made a team of random athletes, and even though they're all unrelated to each other, they still endorse her. Just as Hikaru and Nonoa had pointed out, many in the audience were expressing their admiration over Yuki's connections. Meanwhile, Masachika passively listened to their excitement while keeping a wary eye on the 2 individuals standing behind Yuki and Ayono. Because they were the same 2 people that Tuya had mentioned after the sandbag game. No wonder Kagami and Saiju didn't participate in the sandbag event. Must have been saving their strength and stamina for this. This is going to be tough. So those 2 are the boys you all were talking about earlier. They seem to be quite popular with the girls in the crowd. Yeah, they're apparently really popular, especially Kagami. At any rate, those 2 are top tier when it comes to popularity and physical abilities. They never really showed any interest in getting involved in anyone's campaign, so I definitely wasn't expecting this. I'm impressed Yuki somehow won them over. Seems pretty obvious to me why they did it. Nonoa chimed in casually, interrupting Alisa's and Masachika's conversation. They're definitely into Yuki. What? Masachika looked over at Nonoa with a serious expression, taken aback by her unexpected comment. She met his gaze with half-opened eyes and indifferently added, like, is it really that surprising? Yuki's legit popular. He silently shifted his gaze forward, where it landed on Yuki, who seemed to be mirthfully conversing with those 2 athletic teammates. Alisa's words from earlier flashed through his mind. I looked up how these cavalry games work. When you have 4 people, the rider sits on the arms or the shoulders of the 2 guys in the back, right? In other words, the 2 people in the back are going to be touching my butt. Absolutely not. I'd rather die. Masachika couldn't help but roll his eyes at the time, feeling that she was too much of a clean freak. However, I'm sorry, Alya. I was wrong. Those filthy hands, those goons, who were drooling over Yuki, were going to be touching her. I'm going to kill them. It was pure rage. Who the hell do you think you are, putting your dirty hands on my sister? Looks like I'm gonna have to unleash my Kai blast. Woho, Q's. Looks like you're ready to kill. Masachika. After Alisa's quizzical voice snapped Masachika back into reality, he tucked away his bloodlust to save for after the battle, deciding he needed to have a word with those two guys. Because for now, he had other matters that required his focus. I'm fine. Obviously, this is going to be tough, but if Ayano's going to be in the front, then I'm going to have the height and speed advantage. Plus, the person in the front is ultimately going to have to do most of the work when the rider leans in to grab their opponent's bandana. Yeah. More importantly, Sayaka, Samaya, how are you two feeling? It's Sumi. Ahem. Are you asking how we feel about going up against those two riders? I'll be fine. Sounds like you were expecting me to say something else. I have no idea what you're talking about. As Samaya averted her gaze, Sayaka pushed up her glasses with a sidelong glance and claimed, "You don't have to worry about me, either. I don't plan on holding back." All right. Though reassured by their encouraging words, Masachika still found himself filled with bitterness. I know I considered the possibility, but she really went with those two, huh? To Sayaka and Samaya, both Taiki Kaji and Kirika Osama were figures they'd looked up to as student council president and vice president in middle school, and although they claimed this wouldn't be an issue, there was no way to deny that this was going to be difficult for them. There was no telling how much of this was intentional, but their opponents probably expected that Sayaka would be here helping the instant Yuki suggested that they make this a team battle. While Samaya might have been unexpected, they obviously predicted Elena's participation as well, and to Elena, those two worked under her in the student council. At any rate, they were going to be difficult opponents. However, once Masachika reached this conclusion, a sudden realization dawned on him. Hold up. Wouldn't this go both ways, then? Even Taiki and Kirika would hesitate to go all out against schoolmates younger than they were. Therefore, Masachika couldn't help but wonder what else they had up their sleeves that was worth risking these two going easy on his team. But before he could come up with a single hypothesis, the student introductions came to an end. If your headband is removed or if you fall off your mount, you lose. The game ends once a team loses their captain. Violent acts, such as pulling hair, punching, and kicking are prohibited. However, tackling is allowed. Anyway, that does it for the rules. The commentator paused for a moment before continuing. Now, let's get this started. Horses and riders, get into position. Once the commentator gave them the word, Masachika stopped trying to speculate, then exchanged a glance and a nod with Alisa. Whatever happens, let's stick to the plan. I know. After their brief exchange, Masachika and the others formed their respective teams, and once the riders mounted their horses, they waited in a crouching position for Alisa to address the group. As we discussed during the meeting, I believe their strategy will be to create chaos, but I want each of you to only focus on your target. Samaya, I want you to go after the. How about we refer to them as the boy group and girl group? Good idea. I want you, Samaya, to handle the boy group. Sayaka, you take the girl group. Very well. Roger. Now, let's win this. After everyone firmly nodded back at Alisa, may I ask both teams to please rise? Following the commentator's instruction, all 6 teams stood in unison. The 2 teams faced each other as the crowd's excitement reached its peak. Let the run begin. Once the curtain of the battle was lifted, an unexpected turn of events unfolded before Masachika and his team. Leaving their captain behind, 2 enemy riders began to charge toward them. The unexpected turn of events gave Masachika little choice but to order his team to fall back, but he couldn't do it. No, Alya is the rider. I don't have the right to give orders. Alisa's trembling hands on his shoulders told Masachika everything that he needed to know. There was no doubt that both Maria and Elena, whose hands were clasped with Alisa's, noticed as well. But Masachika and the others waited silently, their trust in their leader unwavering. And then, after what felt like an eternity, Alisa finally spoke up. Samaya, Sayaka, move out. Make sure they don't get near me while you attack. As you wish. Roger. Move out. We're going to back up a little. I want to observe for a while without being disturbed. All right. Let's move back 10 steps. After giving Maria and Elena their orders, they counted to 10 while retreating 10 steps in unison. Once at a safe distance, she reassessed the battlefield, albeit while tilting her head in wonder. The 2 enemy riders who had been charging toward them had slowed down as soon as Samaya and Sayaka moved to intercept them, and before long, they came to a complete stop. What? They're just staring at us. They stopped moving. Both Elena and Maria expressed their surprise toward the unusual behavior. One moment, the enemy was acting extremely aggressive, and now they were being cautious. The male rider and horses on the opposing team were all tall and strong, making them a formidable match for both Sumaya and her team. Meanwhile, with the female rider and horses, there was Karika, who was a skilled member of the ping-pong club, leading their team, which would genuinely be a difficult matchup for Sayaka. In other words, there was almost no logical explanation as to why they weren't being more aggressive. The only reason Masachika could come up with was the fact that many of them used to work in the student council together, so there were psychological factors slowing them down. However, surely, they already prepared themselves for a situation like this and came to terms with it, right? Maybe they thought they would be ready for this, but they got cold feet now that they were face to face? While it wasn't impossible, it was improbable. Then does that mean that Yuki wants to stall? Although Masachika didn't know what they were trying to accomplish, the fact remained that their two allies were doing nothing more than having a staring contest with the enemy right now. This isn't going to be fun for the audience at all. Regardless of their personal feelings, the run was essentially a fun event for the audience to enjoy. In other words, a certain level of showmanship was expected, regardless of who won. No one wanted to see the captains retreat to the back while letting their teammates do all the fighting alone, and winning with such a cowardly strategy would actually lower their popularity, which was the opposite of what each team wanted. That much was apparent during the costume race, when Yuki fully committed to the fun aspect of the game, so she obviously understood this, too. And that's why I thought she was going to try to create chaos, run around like a maniac, and all that. While it would be seen as cowardly if the captain let her teammates defeat the enemy without fighting herself, it would be considered honorable if she were to act as bait in order to allow her teammates to take out the enemy captain. From the moment Yuki proposed a 3-on-3 team battle, Masachika couldn't shake the feeling that she had been aiming for a scenario like that. That was also why he gave Sayaka's and Sumaya's team the orders to focus on the other two riders, instead of on the captain, and that was exactly what they were doing as the group slowly began to surround the enemy riders. Looks like they're planning on flanking us. They probably figure they could try to isolate us individually if we try to run away. Just as Masachika voiced his prediction, the two opposing riders made their move, maneuvering in opposite directions to prevent themselves from being surrounded, until a straight line was formed between the two captains. Isn't this exactly what we want? Yes. It's not exactly what I was imagining, but we could take on their captain one-on-one now, right? Maria and Elena exchanged puzzled glances, and Alisa and Masachika shared their confusion as well. Everything was going exactly as planned. If they were aiming for a chaotic battle, Alisa's team was aiming for a duel. They suggested a team battle because they weren't confident that they could win in a one-on-one fight. In other words, being forced into a duel would be the worst-case scenario for them. At least, that's what I thought. What is going on? And yet a path had opened up, as if Yuki was inviting them over to duel. It was exactly the situation Masachika and the others had hoped for, and that was exactly why it was so unsettling. Is this a trap? Are they trying to lead us into a pincer attack? Masachika voiced his doubts and shared them with his teammates. Or is this the old empty fort strategy? Maybe there's really nothing there, but they're waiting like this to make us think it's a trap, hoping we'll wear ourselves out. Not only were two of the horses here girls, but Alisa was a heavier captain than Yuki as well, which meant that Alisa's team had a clear disadvantage if this turned into a long battle of stamina. TSK. I've got a bad feeling about this. Ever since the battle began, ever since Yuki proposed a team battle, Masachika had a nagging sense that they were being manipulated and were playing right into her hand. Despite their seemingly advantageous position, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being slowly cornered. However, one thing was clear to Masachika. This is exactly what Yuki wants. That was what it boiled down to. But what could they possibly do to change the tide of battle and seize control? Let's do this. Alisa's sudden voice pulled Masachika back from the depths of his thoughts. Let's believe in our friends and push forward. I'll take care of Yuki. It was a voice filled with confidence and strength. Despite surely having her own doubts, she showed no sign of fear as she dispelled the uncertainty of her comrades. It was undoubtedly the voice of a leader who was meant to guide and inspire. Alya, you're incredible. Since when did you become such a strong leader? Masachika was filled with awe and felt a strong resolve growing within himself that was guided by Alisa's voice. You got it, "Captain," he replied with a fearless grin, only to be met with a light slap to the head, but it was this gesture that completely calmed his nerves, allowing him to smile broadly and say, "Moshe, Elena, let's do this." "Sounds good to me. As ye command, matey." "Why did you say that like some sort of low-level pirate? How dare ye? What in the blazes makes ye think I'm some sort of scallywag?" "Your face." After Elena and Masachika's playful banter brought a faint smile to everyone's faces, Alisa ordered, "Full speed ahead. Head straight for their captain. If they look like they're going to retreat, then we'll pincer the girl group first with our allies, then go for the boy group." "Roger." They responded in unison, then charged forward, breathing in sync while sprinting as quickly as they could, just like they'd practiced. Meanwhile, Yuki's team began to advance as well. With the impending battle looming, Alisa's grip tightened on Masachika's shoulders, but once they closed the distance halfway between them, the enemy team made their move. Like jaws snapping shut on helpless prey, the two enemy riders on each side suddenly began to charge toward them. It was chaos born from a pincer attack, and even though it was exactly what they were worried about, not a single one of them stopped, because Alisa told them to believe in their allies. And with those words in their hearts, the three of them continued to push forward. "Oh, they're going for a pincer attack. But wait, what is this? Look at Samaya Kiryuin go. Ah, oh, she did it. She grabbed her opponent's bandana. Whoa! What a tackle by Nonoa Miyami. She just threw her entire body at them on the return. Both riders have fallen. Both riders are out." The commentator announced the valiant efforts of Masachika's comrades, and for a fleeting moment, he genuinely worried about his friends, who apparently had stopped their opponents rather aggressively. "Charge!" But once again, Alisa's powerful voice dispelled those worries. Strengthened by her words, Masachika confidently glared straight ahead. "We're not going to team up with Samaya and try to corner Yuki's team. It's just us versus them." Masachika's rational side honestly had advised against a direct confrontation, since they hadn't quite figured out Yuki's intentions yet. There was still a nagging feeling that they were being led straight into a trap, and if that was the case, then so be it. The captain had made her decision, and besides, this was far more exciting. "We aren't going to use any cheap tricks or unfair tactics. We're just going to charge forward like heroes would." With a ferocious grin of exhilaration, Masachika charged forward. The distance between them narrowed, 10 meters, 5 meters, 3 meters, when their opponent suddenly stopped. Yuki, who had been standing, sat down on her horse. "Is she going to try to go around?" Masachika watched intently, trying to anticipate Yuki's next move, when he suddenly noticed something peculiar. Yuki was sitting far back on her horse, with her hands resting on the shoulders of the two boys behind her. It looked almost as if, are they doing a three-person gymnastic formation? That looks like the cactus move, where, out of nowhere, something slammed right into Masachika. "What the?" He instantly lowered his gaze, where he found that Ayono had thrown her arms around him tightly. The impact was so strong that it had stopped Masachika in his tracks, throwing the other three off balance as well. "Hold up. Does that mean Yuki?" While trying to regain balance in a fluster, Masachika looked ahead to find Yuki with her feet resting on the hands of the two boys as she leaned forward sharply. 3, 2, 1. In perfect sync, the two strong, young men swung their arms up, launching Yuki into the air. "Are you kidding me?" Although Masachika immediately tried to dodge, he could hardly move with Ayono holding on to him. "Stand strong," he shouted, for all he could do was hold on to Maria's and Elena's hands as firmly as he could. However, what the? Alisa's mind went blank as she watched Yuki dive toward her, and she instinctively braced herself to catch her. As if she had forgotten all about the competition, she planted her feet firmly, spread her arms wide, and prepared to catch the girl with wings. And then, with all her might, she caught her friend, who had recklessly turned herself into a projectile. Alisa clenched her jaw, her eyes closed as she withstood the impact. Thanks. I'm really sorry about this." Just as the mischievous whisper tickled her ear, Alisa felt her hair being tugged while the headband was ripped from her head. "I did it," yelled Yuki, thrusting the headband into the air. In an instant, the audience burst into a chorus of cheers and astonished exclamations. "Whoa! Yuki Swoo just took her bandana, but no. According to the rules, that was completely legal. She's still not touching the ground, and tackling is not prohibited, either. That was a legal move. After a brief pause, the commentator declared, Yuki Suwu and Ayono Kimishima win. The crowd once again erupted into cheers and applause at the announcement, as Alisa simply listened with a sense of detachment, her mind seemingly far away.